What is going on, NBA 2K fans? It's your real 2K insider, and we're back after an extended hiatus. I basically had to take the entire month of December off due to my busy work schedule. But we are back making 2K content as my schedule has lightened up post holiday season. So, the first team I wanted to dive in and I guess give a mid-season review on was the Philadelphia 76ers. They're the team that I've put in the most work on over the season. And even though I took a month off, not really much had to be changed. This, by the way, is 2K Sports' ratings and stuff for the team. We're going to dive into my roster as I give my review. It's going to be a review of my roster and what the team is doing, but I wanted to just look at what 2K has for this team, going over things, and then we're going to swap around by position. The one thing I will note is that they keep going back and forth with the position for James Harden and Tyrese Maxey, seemingly every other month, and it's to the point where I feel like they're copying whichever change that I make because I've had Harden as a point guard for most of the season. Based on how he was being utilized in depth charts, he started there with Tyrese Maxey out. But now that Maxey is out, I've actually gone back to having Harden at the two guard, as we'll see. And a big part of that is because DeAnthony Melton, who's started a vast majority of the season, he has continued to start with all three of these guys, partially because Joel Embiid that is out with injury at the moment as soon as Maxi came back. So the whole team has not been able to get healthy, and you've kind of had to bounce the positions around a little bit. I'm okay with moving Harden's position, but like Tobias Harris, he's basically playing the four with him in Embiid's absence, and PJ Tucker, he's basically playing the five. That's not as you don't need to make that change because as soon as Embiid gets healthy, you're going to change those guys back, and it'll be interesting to see what we do with Maxey, Melton, and Harden once Embiid comes back from injury. Because I don't think that they're going to continue to start all three of those guys. But it depends on when Embiid comes back. Maybe they'll find a taker for Tobias Harris in a trade. There's a lot of things that can happen. It's a long season. But let us jump into my roster, Real 2K rosters, which you can find by just searching my gamer tag, Real 2K Insider, or this is the file name. We've got a little under 7,000 downloads on the year, so you can probably find it on the top downloads list as well. All right. So I also wanted to go over my player tiers, or the way that I tier players, which is basically the same way that 2K tiers their players, as we're going to be evaluating these players not by position, but by their tiers. So 2K uses like multiples of five to determine their player tiers. 95 through 99, that's basically your all-time greats. 90 to 94, those are your superstars. I would consider a superstar somebody who's a lock to make the all-star team in a given season. 85 to 89 are all-stars, or what I would like to say all-star caliber. These are all the players that are in the conversation each year for the top players at their position. There are only so many roster spots on the All Star team, so even though I might have a player in this range, uh, like for example, Drew Holiday. It falls in this range. It's not a lock that he's going to make the All Star team, but it could certainly be argued that he's in the All Star conversation. James Harden, I would consider a lock to make the All Star team, and that's why at a 91, I would consider him in the superstar bracket still. Uh, and then for starters, those are 80 to 84 overall rated players. Basically, your average starters that are not quite at all star level. You might note that there is a big difference in how I have Tyrese Maxey rated compared to how 2K Sports does. We'll go over that in a bit. And then from 75 to 79, those are your role players, basically the guys who are either low end starters, high end role players, your seventh, eighth men, pretty much anybody in the rotation is, at least for me, going to fall into this range. 2K is a little sketchy on their consistency. They do a very, let's say, haphazard job of rating the middle class, as we'll get to with some of these guys. And then below that, 70 to 74 is the reserves or fringe NBA players. I would like to think of it as like basically your third strings guys who are kind of clinging to the NBA, or they just got drafted, something. They're either on the way up or they're on the way out usually. And then anybody under a 70, basically 65 to 69, these are your G League players for the most part. I typically am not going to rate a lot of these guys in non-COVID seasons. A lot of these guys, they saw more playing time over the last 2 or 3 years due to the coronavirus outbreak and players being out for health and safety protocols. Now that players are not really missing time for that, there really isn't much of a reason to adjust these guys. Like Jaden Springer, for example, has been drafted in the first round and has played like less than 100 minutes over his 2-year career at the NBA level. He spent the vast majority of it in the G League, so there isn't much of a reason to adjust those guys because they're never going to make it into the rotation in your game. Because one of the main reasons we have this tier list or tier bracket is overall rating. It's important to note has a functional use in the game. It's not just about how good the players are, who's more skilled than who. It's actually affecting the rotation that the AI is using. If the players are rated too high, for example, if Paul Reed rated higher than a 74, he would be in the rotation, whereas I have him out of the rotation. Ditto for Furkan Korkmaz. If you might think that Furkan Korkmaz is a more talented player than Daniel House. That's all well and good, but Daniel House plays over Furkan Korkmaz in real life, so you need to, if you want to simulate the NBA, as close as possible, you want to have House having a higher rating than Korkmaz. So that is also part of the reason why this attribute exists, the intangibles rating, which, as everybody knows at this point, has been in the game for like 3 or 4 years, probably a little longer. Time is a vortex since the coronavirus. But basically, you'll see that I have a lot of guys maxed out. This is basically to factor in that the overall rating formulas that 2K has are not always foolproof, and that sometimes you need to boost certain players in order to make sure that they hit the player tier that you want them to ensure that they're starting over the player that you need them to, etc. 2K does this as well. There have been a lot of updates where they really don't update much of a player's attributes, but they're just tweaking away at that intangibles rating to get guys to move up or down in importance to their team. So with all of that groundwork out of the way, let's start breaking down the actual players. Or I guess let's actually break down the 76ers. They're 24 and 15, fifth in the Eastern Conference. They're sixth in SRS rating, sixth in net rating, 3.7 net rating, 11th in offensive rating, 114.4 points per 100 possessions, and fourth in defensive rating, 110.7. And this is despite injuries to their top three players. Embiid has played 28 of 39, 72% of his possible games. He is, however, currently sidelined and, according to Doc Rivers, does not have a timetable. He's got a foot injury. You'll note that Embiid had foot issues very early in his career after he was drafted, so they always want to be careful there. So that's why he doesn't have a timetable. But yeah, it's not looking like Embiid's gonna play 60 games once again. James Harden, he's played 24 of 39 games, 62% of his possible games. I expect him to at least hit the 60 mark. I believe the most he can hit is 67. He's usually healthy-ish. Doesn't have prior to turning 33, he was for the most part an Iron Man. And Tyrese Maxey, he missed. He's played 20 of 39 possible games, 51% of his games this year. He was out for about a month and a half with an injury, but he just came back just as Embiid came out, as mentioned, and that affects the positions and the rotation a little bit. As you can see, PJ Tucker playing the 5, Tobias Harris playing the 4, and really James Harden's playing the 3 with Melton at the 2 at the present moment. But we'll get into what the deal is with that later. Worth noting, I guess, also that Melton, Maxey, and Harden, none of them have the small forward as their second position. So had to do a little bit of wizardry to make that rotation happen, but again, we'll get to that. Joel Embiid, he's a 96 overall in the what I would consider the all-time bracket. It's his third straight year with a 30-plus player efficiency rating. The only other centers in history to do that are Wilt Chamberlain, Shaquille O'Neal, and Nikola Jokic. He led the league last year in points per game with 30.6. That is up to 33.5 this season, which is remarkably second in the NBA to Luka's Doncic's 34.0. So he's scoring 3 more points per game, but not leading the league. Okay. This kind of just goes to show how much scoring is up for star players this year. That's been a big topic of conversation of late. 64 true shooting, 38 usage percentage for Embiid. Slightly up from 62 and 37 last year, but it's worth noting that his rebound rates are down. 5.9 offensive rebound percentage, which is a career worst. 5.9 defensive rebound percentage. I'm sorry, 26.2 defensive rebound percentage. That is the second worst of his career. You can see I've got him at a 56 and a 96. It's actually I think I'm going to tweak that down 2 points. Boom. Okay. He's missed the last 3. Sorry, I already did that. But yeah, this is actually his third bout with injury this season. Injuries are ultimately what's going to keep him from MVP in his career. As Nikola Jokic is able to play at the same high level, but he stays on the court for 82 games a year. Embiid's currently on pace to play 59 games this year, but that mark dwindles for each game that he misses with his current injury. So one of the great players, but he's better in the playoffs than the regular season, I guess. And his absence is probably the Sixers are going to have to fight to get playoff seeding. They are currently 5th, and they've dealt with more injuries than you would have otherwise anticipated. I think nobody would have thought that Maxey was going to go down. And Harden's usually a little healthier, even though you can factor in his age. But James Harden, he's a 91 overall in my roster, which is a +2 from what 2K's got him at. Also worth noting that he started the season, or he started the default rating. His rating on September 9th, when NBA 2K23 released, was an 89. So 2K still got him at that level. I consider him a 91, higher rated player than that. I am going to be going over the default ratings for each of these guys. So Embiid, he was a 96 out of the box, and he's basically playing at the same level, I think, since then. So I think rather than looking at players on like a week-to-week basis, like, oh, player X went up +1 in the last roster update, it's a little more informative to look at where they were at the start of the year, as that shows kind of their journey through the season. But James Harden, his production he's averaging 22 points, 6 rebounds, and 11 assists. I believe he's 4th in assist rate in the NBA. Assist rate being assist percentage, probably like one of the leaders top two in assists per game. Don't have that offhand, but again, production very similar to last season. I would say slightly better. He's shooting 37% from three. Last year, he was a career worst 33%. You might recall that at the start of the season, he was struggling with an abdomen injury that he had in the offseason. So that kind of dragged his season numbers down a little bit. So he's more or less back to normal. And worth noting that his 37%, he does a lot of that off the dribble. He's only assisted on something like 37% of his threes. So if I was just factoring this current season, I would say he probably would be like an 88 or an 87 or something like that. But because I'm still using a blend of like the last 2 years, he's in 84 here. I think at the start of the season I had him in like a 81. So he's trickling upwards throughout the year. And he's more of a point guard on offense. We touched on this a little bit with the positions. Like it's kind of a conundrum what you make these guys. He's a point guard on offense, but more of a wing on defense. Is not like he's never the point of attack defender ever. Um, but he did play point guard exclusively during Maxi's injury, so I am a little back and forth on these guys. Personally, I think that Tyrese Maxey, who we're going to jump into now, would make a fantastic sixth man of the year candidate on an annual basis. You don't need to have his scoring in the lineup with Harden and Embiid, and I think having him come off the bench as like a microwave guy would really unlock, in the starting lineup, he kind of is a little bit of an afterthought, especially in the playoffs last year. He was just like a spot up shooter, and that's not really his game. You want him to have a more dynamic role, I think. Even though he's not a great playmaker, he is a pretty good on ball scorer. But I have him at an 83 overall, which is -3 from what 2K's got him at. And worth noting that Maxi, he started the year at an 85, so 2K's actually boosted his rating by a point, even though he's more or less like having a similar production year to last season. He's averaging 21 and a half points per game, which is up, but I mean, efficiency wise, like he's at a 56 true shooting percentage, which is -3. The one good thing is his usage rate is way up, 27 usage, which is +7. But the team's only 10-8 in his starts, and they played a lot better with De'Anthony Melton starting. De'Anthony Melton fits better in a complementary role. He's a better defensive player than Tyrese Maxey, so that's part of why I think that Maxey would be better served coming off the bench as a super sub. And as mentioned, right now I have Maxey at point guard, primarily just due to the Embiid injury. I do think that he will come off the bench once everybody's healthy, but it does remain to be seen. 2K's got him in the All-Star tier at an 86. And like I strongly disagree with that because he's just not that good of a playmaker. He only has like a 19 assist percentage for his career. Although this is actually slightly underrated. Let me just boost that. I wonder if that'll affect his rating. Did not. Okay. But basically, he's at a 19% assist rate for his career. That's pretty below average for a starting point guard. Obviously, James Harden does the bulk of the playmaking on this team, but even before the team got Harden, he was not like super high or anything. I think his assist rate topped out at like 24%, which is like a 70 rating in the last season before the trade. So his playmaking is like way too low to be considered a star guard. Like you wouldn't take him over Drew Holiday, who I have at an 87, or let's say a Darius Garland, who I've got at an 87. I do think that Maxey is a tier below that, and a lot of it is because he's just not that good of a playmaker. And that's why I think he'd be a great six man because he's more of a combo guard than an actual lead guard. But let's hop on over to Tobias Harris, who is the other player in the starter tier. Harris, similar season to last year, despite the position swap. Last year, the last couple of years, he's been playing the four. This year, he's playing the three to accommodate PJ Tucker. Uh, but currently playing the four with Embiid sidelined indefinitely. 57 true shooting percentage plus three, 20 usage percentage minus two. So he's playing a smaller offensive role, but that's allowed his efficiency to improve. And it's worth noting that his assists are down this season at like 12% assist rate, which is like a 55 pass rating. That's even though Harden missed a month. Harris is one of those players like Maxey, who as soon as the team got Harden, his assist rate dropped a little bit. So that just goes to show that even though Harden was out, they didn't adjust Harris's role at all, and they kept him the same, and they more or less gave the playmaking opportunities to guys like Shake Melton, or Milton, I should say. So I've got him at an 82. That's what he started the year as. That's what 2K's got him as. So I'm pretty content with that. His rebounds are slightly down. Like rebounds for the entire team, more or less, are slightly down individually. But I think a lot of that is because like Harris he moved from the four to the three, and the player that he replaced is Danny Green, who was essentially a two guard, playing the small forward. So even though like that when you so they're a better rebounding team overall, but that means that the rebound ratings for everybody are effectively going to suffer, if that makes sense. And also they picked up Harden mid-season last year. Harden is a great rebounder, so 4'8" for a guard, so he's definitely taken away rebounds from guys like Embiid, Harris, and even PJ Tucker a little bit. Also worth noting that D'Anthony Melton is a very good rebounder for a guard as well. And we'll jump in onto him. He's a 79 overall rating in both my roster and 2Ks. Started the year as a 77. Worth noting that I've got 18 badges on him, which is plus 15. They only have 3 badges on him. He's been, for the last couple of years, one of the more neglected players in their roster. What he's doing this year, he's been doing with the Grizzlies the last couple seasons, but because he's playing in a larger media market, maybe only now they decided to notice. But he is having the best, like, I don't know about the best, but the most regular season success of his career, as he started a career high 29. Is it a career high? I think he started more games actually as a rookie in Phoenix, but he wasn't any good when he did that. But he started 29 of 36 games this season due to the injuries to Harden and Maxey. And I would consider him like the sixth man of the year, even though he technically wouldn't qualify because he started so many games. Like, he is the number 6 guy on this team, but because there have been so many injuries, like, that's why he's racked up so many starts. Kind of interesting. Um, and again, as mentioned, he's now starting with Embiid sidelined. You'll notice that I don't have a second position on him, and that's because he is a two guard in pretty much every lineup that he's in. Either he's playing like so. I've got in old gen on the PS4, um, they have tertiary positions, like a third position you can give to players, and they don't have that in next gen for whatever reason, and it's like sorely missing. Because a guy like Harden, there are times where a three guard lineup makes sense. This is one of those times, and you should be able to make him a natural small forward because Harden and Melton are both two guards, and Harden is the higher rated player. When you like automate the rotation, it's going to default to having Harden as the two guard. And I definitely want Harden's second position to be the one because he played the one when Tyrese Maxey was out. So, but Melton basically never plays the three. I don't want to make him a three because then like those lineups will naturally occur even when everybody is healthy. I don't want D'Anthony Melton subbing in for Tobias Harris ever. Um, it's just the fact that the way that the Sixers are shorthanded. Um, you know, basically this annoys me, even though he doesn't have the second position. And how did I manufacture that? Because I'm way more aggressive with this than 2K is. In fact, I don't think they use this at all. The non-starter, force non-starter, pretty much, I have this applied to a lot of players. The Sixers are a pretty finicky group because it's also not even the overall rating that affects the whether or not a guy plays. It's actually also the coach rating, the like the what is it, the stuff like the young old lineup performance the system proficiency preference is actually the main thing. Where do I get to that? uh, no, how do I see coaching? How do I see coaching? Like, how do I get to the assistant coaches? Oh, switch staff departments. There we go. What the heck? All right. Rivers, where is his? I'm just gonna edit staff. Team style. Shooting mid. All right. So all this shooting mid, offense first, defense heavily favors defense, slightly favors guards. Blah blah blah. There's just his system. His preferred system is grit and grind, and then there are proficiency metrics all over here. Basically, all of this stuff also factors into the the uh, the rotation AI that this game uses. So sometimes you need to apply stuff like, for example, on one team, George Niang might start over PJ Tucker. On another team, PJ Tucker might start over George Niang. Montrezl Harrell would be another one. Like, actually, Montrezl Harrell is another example of like where you need to use that. Right now, PJ Tucker is the starting five on this team, but there are other centers on the team who are going to start by default. So I basically have to apply it to Harrell and Reed, the force non-starter, in order for PJ Tucker to pop up as the starting power forward. So just a little, yeah, there's a lot of complexity in order to get this team to play right. But like ratings wise, they are kind of easy to like keep track of because they have like basically two-star players, and everybody else is effectively a role player. So there's not a ton of like fluctuation for a lot of the guys on this team. They kind of are what they are. But going back into D'Anthony Melton, after we tangented off, he started 29 of the 36 games this year. Worth noting that he only has 0 dunks in 1,084 minutes. He had 21 last year in 1,657, which was 3.7% of his field goal attempts. So he is 24. Typically, 24, 25 is when guys start to lose a little bit of athleticism. I think in his case, it's actually just fitting in with the role that Doc is a little more rigid with the team roles in his offense than other teams are. Because, for example, also his free throw rate also cut in half, but he's plus 7% of his shots are from three, but his rim field goal attempts are actually plus 1%. So he's taking a lot more threes, or slightly more threes, but his rim finishing actually hasn't like gone down. So for him to be dunking less, I think might just be a function of the Sixers don't run at all. They are like 26th in pace, I think. Whereas last year he played with the Memphis Grizzlies with John Morant, so they ran a lot. So that probably factors in a little bit to the drop in dunk rate for Melton. But as a result of his decreased dunk rate, I did drop his dunk rating by like 10 points. Something to keep an eye on. He is leading the league with a 3.1 steal percentage. He is 3.0% for his career. So always perennially among the league leaders in that. He is a defensive playmaker, and that's part of why I think that he's a better starter than Tyrese Maxey for this team. You see, with only a 57 steal rate, and but otherwise, he's been a really solid addition for the team. And they really didn't trade. They got him for Danny Green, who was injured, or who was going to be injured this season and miss most of it. So, pretty good deal there. In order, he's been a big part of keeping the Sixers afloat despite all the injuries. Let's jump on to Shake Milton, who likewise has helped to bridge the gap. He started the year out of box at a 74 overall. I've had him. I think I had him at like a 76, 77 ish rating coming into the year. 2K was just very low on him to begin with. We both have him now at a 79 overall rating. Worth noting that I've got +7. I've got 9 badges on him, which is +7 from what 2K's got on him. Again, they're not really consistent with the middle class of the NBA. But Milton at the start of the year was completely out of the rotation. 7 minutes per game in 4 October games, and he had 4 DNP CDs. Since then, he's averaged 26 minutes per game. So I'm not the hugest fan of the way that Doc Rivers manages his rotations, and I think Milton's a classic example of why that would be the case. He should not have been out of the rotation at the start of the year. Like, he didn't forget how to play basketball or anything. Just he wasn't being put in a position to succeed. He might be the best fourth guard in the NBA. Like, the Sixers have a ton of depth with 4 of their top 6 players are effectively guards. Um, he's averaging a career high 51% shooting, or 51 field goal percentage. 37 3-point percentage is the second best of his career. So overall, he's not quite having a career year because he did do this. He did perform at this level a couple years ago, back in 2021. But he was a big part of the reason why the Sixers were able to overcome the injury to James Harden. George Niang, 77 overall. Me and 2K share that rating. He started the year at a 73 in their roster. He's again a player that they kind of have discounted for a while. He should have been at this level dating back to last season, as not much has really changed about his game. He's been the same player for the last, like, however many years. Right now, a career high 63 true shooting percentage on 19 usage. He's a shooter, doesn't offer much else. He's the modern Steve Novak. Good regular season player, but PJ Tucker, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with them, because PJ Tucker's not having a good season by any stretch of the imagination. I will get to him in a second, but George Niang, he's a player that, like, you can't really play him in the playoffs because he's not good enough defensively. Like, he'll get attacked. Like, you're only as good as your weakest link in the playoffs defensively. So I think Niang's a great regular season player, but during the playoffs, Tucker's still probably going to be the more valuable player. Now, Tucker at a 76, that's +1 from what 2K's currently got him at right now. He started the year at a 77, so they've got him at a -2. He's averaging 3.3 points per game and 27.5 minutes per game. That is not good. He's got a 4.9 player efficiency rating, 54 true shooting, but only 6 usage percentage. He is just allergic to shots right now. The Sixers are essentially playing 4-on-5, and it's looking like last season's career high 59 true shooting and 42 3-point percentage. A bit of an outlier. I don't know if it's the system or what, but also only 41 field goal percentage this year, down from 48%. He was a little bit better of a finisher last season. Last season from his close range. 2K's got him in, I think, at like a 97 close shot rating because they don't know how to factor volume effectively. So Tucker is a good scorer when he does take shots from here, but he only attempts one field goal per 36 minutes, actually 0.9, not even a full shot per 36 minutes from this range. So, like, is he really an 80? Like, I might even go lower than this, despite his high, like, percentage or whatever. Like, he's just not, he hits him when he's open, is basically what that means, but he's not going to be taking any contested shots. Really, just a corner 3 point shooter at this stage of his career. I think this 83 that I've got on him is kind of factoring in last season's 42%. Realistically, probably around like an 80 for the current season, which is okay, but it doesn't really do much else besides shoot threes and defend. I did drop his layup rating. That's a 60, just because he's not finishing it all at the rim. He's not. He's got clear lanes to the basket right now, and he's not driving. And so, yeah, that's how you average 3.3 points per game in 28 minutes. So kind of disappointing for him. And they did give him like a 3-year deal. So I mean, he's 37 years old. Is he washed? That's a question. We're going to find out the answer, I think, over the rest of the year. Montrezl Harrell, he's a player that also, is he washed? We will find out this month with Embiid out. He started the year at a 76 overall. It was probably a little low, but given the role that he's playing with the Sixers, I've been dropping him throughout the year based on where I previously had him. He's only at, because again, the overall rating isn't how talented a player is, it's what role are they playing on the team. He's only averaging 12.6 minutes per game. Last year, he was at 23 minutes per game, so that was more of like a seventh or eighth man type of contribution. Now he's like the ninth or 10th man. He's really only playing when Embiid is out. Actually, he was, for Embiid's first two injuries, he didn't play more. He's only playing more recently in January with Embiid out. Um, so that has also been a factor in why I've only got him at a 76. Otherwise, his play is a little diminished. He's more, he is what he is. We know Montrezl Harrell after 8 or however many years he's been in the NBA. He's a great pick and roll threat, limited defender. That's basically who he is. Um, which, has speculative value on a playoff team. Maybe the team would be better off playing Paul Reed. We're going to find out a little bit about the Sixers and whether or not they need to get a better starting or a better backup five uh, with them beat out. Matisse Thybulle, 76 overall. I personally would have him at like a 75, like contribution wise, but I have he's a very polarizing player, basically a zero on offense, very similar to PJ Tucker. But I do have some Hall of Fame badges on him and a lot of golds. He's definitely a game-changing defensive player, but he only plays offense. He only plays one side of the court. He plays offense like he's being guarded by Matisse Thybulle. So 50 mid-range, 50 close. Like, he's probably the worst player inside of the worst scorer in the NBA between 3 and 23 feet. I think would be Matisse Thybulle, and it's not exactly a great at the rim or from 3 either. Not a great free throw shooter, etc. So. But he was all NBA or all defense. He was all defense second team the last 2 seasons. So some of that does factor into his rating a little bit. And he is playing over Daniel House at the current moment. House basically fell out of the rotation once Maxey came back from injury. So I don't really have any issues with the pecking order. Just me personally, I would have him at a 75. Just clinging on with those Hall of Fame badges that like props him up just a little bit. It is worth noting that 2K's got him at a 74, and he did start the year at a 77 in their roster, so they have dropped him 3 points. And I'm still trying to drop him down a little bit. Going to Daniel House. Well, I guess worth noting a little more with Thibault. Um, Only playing 12 minutes per game this year, which is also why we've dropped his ratings dropping. Last year he was at 26 minutes per game, so his playing time's literally been slashed in half. PJ Tucker basically took his role as the defensive zero or the offensive zero on the team. Only 41 field goal percentage, which is down from 50% last year, and that's owing not to his 3 point shooting, but his 2 point percentage. 53% down from 67%. Again, his dunk rate has been cut in half. Similar to D'Anthony Melton, I think the Sixers are running less, and therefore Thibault's had fewer opportunities in transition. And his 3.3 steal percentage this season um, would be the league leader, but he doesn't hasn't played enough minutes to qualify. Last season, he led the league with 3.4%. He's at 3.6% for his career. Essentially, the premier steals player in the NBA, which is why I've got the Hall of Fame badges on him. In other eras of him, like he would probably be at like 5% in the 90s, for example. But it does seem like he might have already played the high point of his career. He hasn't developed in 4 years, and at age 25, this is more or less the age where athleticism starts to tail off, and players are usually able to overcome that because their IQ is better. They have a better understanding of how to play the game. That's why you see a lot of players who typically like scrub out of the NBA after like their sixth or seventh year because they're like 25 years old. Like they're only gonna if they haven't showed any type of improvement, like they're only gonna get worse from there. So there's not really any reason to invest in them after that. Thibault's going to be a restricted free agent, and really interesting. I have no idea what's going to happen for him, how other teams are going to value him, etc. Because clearly, just a very like extreme player, and how should you value a defensive specialist that gives you like nothing on offense? And the fact that he's playing such a minimal role this year is probably going to hurt his contract negotiation, but it probably does increase the odds of him looking for greener pastures elsewhere. Although I don't expect, the Sixers will probably tender the qualifying offer to him, so I don't necessarily think he's going to go anywhere without a sign and trade. Anywho, Daniel House, 75 overall, +2 from what 2K's got him at. Which they had him at a 72 to start the year, which this was honestly low because he was like the seventh or eighth man on the Utah Jazz last season after he joined them midseason. And 61 true shooting for him on 12 usage percentage. Normally that's due to a player improving their 3 point stroke, but he's actually only at 34%. What's actually improved is his rim finishing. So that's actually something that I haven't factored in to the ratings yet. I've still got him at an 81 3 point. You could probably say this is more accurate to what he would look like for the current season, but we're going to just leave it for now. He is out of the rotation at the moment, but obviously with all the amount of injuries that the team's experienced throughout the year, that's subject to change. And that rounds out all of the quote-unquote role players on this team. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players in that range, and then 4 players. So we did the top 11 players on this team. Paul Reed, Frickin' Korkmaz, those are the two guys in the fringe tier, I would say. Paul Reed, worth noting, this is a -2 overall from what 2K's got him at. They have him at a 76, which just goes to show like how it's classic 2K. They don't understand their own rating system. Paul Reed's only played 316 minutes this year, 9.9 minutes per game. Embiid is hurt, and he's not necessarily getting minutes. He's the definition of a third string center, and they're giving him a rating higher than Matisse Thybulle, higher than Daniel House, higher than PJ Tucker. Paul Reed has a higher rating than PJ Tucker. That's wild to me. As much as PJ has struggled this year. So, yeah. And it's not like PJ's exactly lit the world on fire this season either. If anything, it's been kind of a disappointing season for him. We were hoping that he would take a step forward. His only competition for minutes was Montrezl Harrell, but to this point, he hasn't been able to knock him out. He doesn't really project as like a good enough offensive player, and defensively, he's a little bit limited. He's a five and a fours body, but can't defend fours. So, what do you really do there? You can only employ him against other like small ball lineups. But those small ball lineups are also going to feature 3-point shooters usually, which means you're losing out offensively having Paul Reed out there. So, I've got him in the fringe category. Definitely third string. I don't know what 2K's thinking there. Furkan Korkmaz, 72 overall. He started the year as a 73. Both me and 2K have him at a 72. Effectively lost his rotation spot to Daniel House, who's also on the edges of the rotation himself. But really, the main thing for Cork is he had a 2-year stretch, like basically the bubble. He shot the ball really well, similar to Duncan Robinson. But other than that, like since the bubble, he has not been able to shoot. And prior to the bubble, or the bubble years, I would say, like in 2020 to 2021, he was 244 of 625 from three, 39%. The rest of his career, 140 of 461, only 30%. So literally, he's in those 2 years, he was like an 84 3-point shooter. Since the rest of his career, he's been a 75 3-point shooter, which is not good enough to crack a rotation. So I do think that this might be the year that Corky probably has to head back to Europe, as he hasn't really been able to build on the success that he had 2 years ago. But there's still time for him to turn it around. But again, third string guys, pretty clear. And then we've got the G League guys. There isn't really much to talk about here with any of these guys. I already talked about Springer at the top of the cast. They used a first round, definitely the biggest bust of the 2021 draft, drafted 28th overall, but has barely played. I would expect him to get salary dumped during the season at the trade deadline to a team with cap space, maybe the Spurs, that can afford to take a look, because it seems clear that he's not going to factor into the long-term plans of the team. He kind of projected as, I think his draft comparison was Frank Ntilikina, who, if you recall, took like 5 years to become like an NBA player, and even then he's still like a fringe NBA player. That's kind of what Springer, he's definitely on track there. Just he was drafted 28th instead of 7th, so it's not as like much of a bust, but it's a guy they took a flyer on, and hasn't really come to borne any fruit yet. Louis King just joined the team recently. Julian Champagne. 2K's got him at small forward, but he is playing the 4 in the G League. Given that they signed Louis King to a two-way deal, that should normally be an indicator that teams typically don't have two players at the same position on two ways. So that's how you know that they changed his position. Also worth noting that 2K's had Springer at point guard at various stages. Like he was a sort of a point guard, combo guard in college, but at the G League level, the last 2 years of his career, he has been a two guard. Part of the disappointing aspect of his development is he really doesn't seem like he's going to develop into like a the high end for him would be like a Marcus Smart or Kyle Lowry type of guy, but I think he's just so far away offensively that he's never really going to become that. But anyway, hope you guys liked this deep dive, this mid-season review on the Philadelphia 76ers. Be on the lookout for more 2K related content coming up now that I've got some free time. If you want to get access to my modern era spreadsheet, you can shoot me $20 on PayPal. And you can DM me on Twitter at Real2KInsider for details on how to do that, what you get, etc. It lasts the entire season. I may put a discount out on that at some point in the future, like towards the end of the season. It doesn't make sense for I don't think for it to be like a $20 thing if it's only going to be for 3 months or whatever. But um, these are the files that I've been using the last couple years, and it's probably the most extensive 2K file on the internet. It's something that I worked on during the pandemic, as I had a year off from work, so I was able to really put something very comprehensive together, and it's able how I'm able to keep up with I took a month off from 2K rosters, but I was still able to kind of keep pace and maintain because I was able to create this great tool for myself that you guys would be able to use, and you get to see various anecdotes that I've made over the years while throwing it together, etc. It's big enough that you can get lost in it. Let's put it that way. And I think it's a steal deal for $20. So if that interests you, shoot me a DM on Twitter at Real2KInsider. Otherwise, or leave a comment in the YouTubes, etc. If you don't have Twitter, whatever, reach out to me and we'll figure something out. But thanks guys for watching, and I'll catch y'all later. Peace.